Welcome. This is the first time I haven't had the dinner show, so it's pleasant to be here when you're not all wishing you could be eating or drinking. I thought, our music speaker, Bob Ray, specialty is rock and roll. He's on at 6:15 tonight, and rock and roll seems like a really appropriate topic for these conditions. So recommend you catch him at 6:15 tonight. Also, it just pointed out to me there's a teleprompter here, which if I had known that, I wouldn't have to memorize anything. I could just read all of this, but they want us to work. So anyway, we're looking today at not our next stop, but the one after that, Casablanca, Morocco, the Western Sahara. I'm Bill Crowley. If you haven't been here before, I'm a geographer. And we're going to look at some general information, my sort of usual pattern, general information about Casablanca and Morocco, and then look at just a tad bit of history, not too much, also some geography of the country before that, and then a tad bit of history, not my usual going way back thing, and then a lot of slides of Casablanca, of Rabat, a couple of Agadir, and then we'll spend a fair amount of time talking about Western Sahara, which has been a really significant issue for a long time that most of us in the U.S. at least, I don't know about you folks from Australia and Europe, or South America for that matter, get much word on it, but we certainly don't in the U.S., and it's a very important issue for this part of the world. But first, I have to tell you, in addition to all the rock and roll last night, I really couldn't sleep because I've been thinking about this problem that I think is one of the world's most serious issues, certainly in the United States, extremely serious. Nothing like, what's going on in Ukraine or Israel, Palestine, or now maybe in Syria, but nonetheless, it's something that I think affects all of us, and that has to do with pillows. If you remember, we used to go to bed and there were two pillows there, if there were two of you. It gradually got up to four, and that was okay. But now, this is a hotel. There's only one slide I'm going to show you that I staged. The rest of them are all natural, whoever did it, pillow arrangement. So there's a hotel. There are 6 pillows there. Why? I don't know. The red one people just throw on the floor anyway. Here's just a close-up of it so you can see I'm not making up numbers. Here's another hotel. The round one is for what? I don't know, back exercises, but again, it's a waste of pillows and money. And of course, I've been trying to find out who's responsible for this. Of course, whenever we don't know, there's a segment of the population that says aliens did it. And then some people thought maybe the pillow guy was responsible. But he seems to have lost some authority, so I don't think he was the guy. And here, just to show you what we've got, 8 pillows on this one. On another cruise line, my wife didn't go with me, and so a buddy of mine went along. We had twin beds. I came back from breakfast. This is what my bed looked like. And I didn't arrange this. And I looked at her and I said, well, okay, you guys go ahead and take the bed. I'll just take the floor, because clearly there's no room for me on there. Well, a few years ago, I was traveling cross country, and I stopped at my niece's house in Waterloo, Iowa. She said, Uncle Bill, you take my room. So I said, okay, and I walked in. And I was absolutely gabberflasted. I said, Janie, I've been preaching against this. What have you done? She said, well, my daughter gave me 17 pillows for Mother's Day, so I have to put them on the bed. So I rearranged them a little bit. And then I went further west to my brother's house in Reno, Nevada. His wife heard about my pillow thing, so she put every pillow in the house on the bed. But I tell you that I have found a point of salvation. It may be one of those things that the pendulum went so far this way that now, you know how those things often, the reaction is to go way back the other way instead of going to a nice middle ground. So my wife and I, on a cruise that ended in Copenhagen 2 years ago, we decided to stay an extra night, and the hotel we got here was I did not make this up. This is really how it was. those were our pillows. And I thought, what, did they have rhesus monkeys in here earlier? Because these are clearly not big enough for human beings. But that's the pendulum going way back the other way. So I'm just hoping that we can, but I have to tell you, no complaints ever against Viking. But on this little couch we have in our room, there are 4 pillows on the couch, so you can't really sit on it very well. And Viking has a disease too, so, maybe there isn't any hope. All right, on to today's topic. Morocco, 35 million people. It's a bit fewer people than California, but a bit larger than California, but more or less that kind of size and kind of linear in a way, more north to south than it is east to west. Not quite 2/3 urban, so there is still a very substantial rural population, and agriculture is still an important piece of the economy. It's a constitutional monarchy, but it's quite a bit different than, say, the monarchy of Spain or of Great Britain, because here the king has real power. He has the ultimate shot in everything. Now, since France got out, there have been 6 revisions of the Constitution, the last one in 2011, which gave the legislature more power. Regional councils could now be elected freely, but the king still has a final say. So if there's something he doesn't like, it's not going to happen. But the last 2 kings, since they separated from France, there have been 3 kings. This one has been king since 1999, so he's been there a while. And his father had been king from 1961 to 1999, so he'd been there a long time too. They've been very, very astute politicians. There have been at times riots and conflicts domestically. So it hasn't always been smooth sailing, but that happens in almost every country. It certainly happens in the United States. So it's a system that somehow works. A lot of people believe in the king, but still he has, in the end, the final say always. Principal cities here. Now, 2 weeks ago, I took the included tour, which was the best one on the cruise, in my opinion. So if you're signed up for that and you get the guy we got, it should be good. And you go to a lot of different places, and we made 4 or 5 stops. Casablanca, he said, was 6 million people. I've looked up the latest data on this, and I don't get that many. It doesn't make any difference. Well, it does, but it's a big city, far bigger than anything else in Morocco. But the capital is Rabat, the 2nd largest city, and it has a kind of a twin city across the river called Saleh, which would take it over 2 million for the metropolitan area. Fez up in the mountains, an old historic city of import, over 1 million. Tangier, this what has been many times an international city with nobody really running the show. I haven't been to Tangier, and I ache to see it because it has such a rich history. It's over 1 million. Then you got Marrakesh, old capital. We'll see a map of that in a second. And Agadir, which is, believe it or not, a beach resort city, among other things, much farther south. So just to show you where these cities are, this is a map of Morocco and part of Western Sahara. So there's Casablanca, underlined in red, and then Rabat. It's an hour up the road, about 50 to 60 miles up the road. Then there is Fez in the interior, Tangier up there. Here is Marrakesh, and here's Agadir down here. So you can see 4 of the cities are coastal cities. 2 of them are in the mountains or foothills of the country. But other than Agadir, and Marrakesh, the population heavily concentrated in that northeastern part of the country. Topographically, it's a rugged country, a lot of mountains, and they are really important in terms of climate, because the wet parts of Morocco are all on the northwest side, because that's where most of the rain-bearing storms come in. And then the other side, mountains, to put it in simple terms, take out the moisture as those systems come across. And so it's all Sahara Desert on the other side. And once you get down to Western Sahara, south of Morocco, it is all Sahara Desert. And now, if you ever go to Morocco and you go up in the mountains and somebody asks you, well, what mountains were you in? Just say the Atlas, because you've got the middle Atlas, the high Atlas, and the anti-Atlas. So there's the Rif also, but you got a 75% chance of being right if you can't remember which of those atlas you're in. But the big time ones are the high Atlas. They're called that for a region. They get snow in the winter. Highest peak, over 13,600 feet. It's the highest peak in Arab countries, the highest peak in North Africa, etc. It's not the highest peak in Africa by any means, but it's significant. And then the Moroccan population, here you can see it's heavily concentrated on the ocean side of the country, and all that yellow, that's all Sahara Desert, and obviously not very densely populated. And the most populated areas are generally closest to the coast. So they average over 110 people per square mile, 130 people per square mile. And then here is something that we really got to get a hold of. A lot of people think these countries are just all Arabic people, and Arabs dominate in most cases the governments, etc., the spoken language. But the Berbers were there first. Okay, so Arabs didn't appear in this part of the world, and if you saw Knut Nessie's lecture, our resident historian on the Maghreb countries, then you know some of this already. So the Arabs didn't appear until Islam arose, and so we're talking about the 7th century and on into the 8th century that they swept across North Africa, became the dominant force. But the Berbers were there, and for example, 2 weeks ago, I got on the included tour for Algiers, and the guide immediately said, I am a Berber. And Berber pride has something that has really come a long ways in the last quarter century plus, maybe last half century, so that Berber, for example, is now one of the national languages in Morocco, along with Arabic, obviously, and French is widely taught in the schools as well, and now English comes along quite a bit too. But first time I went to Morocco, I went out to eat dinner, and this is embarrassing for a geographer to say, but I couldn't find my way back to the hotel. My wife, I just tell her, hey, I was out exploring. But anyway, so I asked a couple of guys that were standing outside of cafes, very friendly folks, and I had some ability in French, and so most people there, an awful lot of them, certainly all the educated folks, speak French still in Morocco, and that's true you probably found out in Tunisia yesterday, and also in Algeria. But here we see that the Arabs, the brown on this map, they dominate, the Berbers in the orange, and then mixes of the two, and they're mixed all over the country, but dominant out in those yellowish areas, and there are some tribal areas as well. But there are estimates that the Berber population is as much as 40% of the population. Probably most of those are Berber-Arab mix. There is a lot of that, as you might imagine. It's been going on for 1,300 years or so, so not surprising that would be the case. But the Berbers have, again, in the last half century, raised their voice considerably, have united quite a bit, but there are still Berber tribal groups, particularly up in the Atlas, where the government doesn't have the most control that they might want to have. Here is an example. This is actually from Agadir. We've got 3 alphabets. So on top, you've got Arabic. In the middle, you have this Berber language. Their language is called Tifinagh. I know you're going to remember that. I'm going to show you their terminology in a second. But it's a different alphabet, and then French at the bottom. And the name of what it is in French also. So you can see the cultural mix here. And this is in Agadir, which is a very Berber part of the country. And here you see this language thing again. This guy is selling sugarcane juice outside the Kasbah and Rabat. And on his wagon, he's got Arabic at the top, he's got French, He's got this language English, sugarcane juice, you can figure that out. And this alphabet, somebody can clue me in, it's not Berber as far as I can tell. I don't know what it is, but Chinese, Japanese, Korean, I don't know. And then back in Agadir, a modern building, and we've got languages up here, Arabic and French. We've got English here, Foxcar. It's pretty close. Internet, although Internet's a language in various is used in various languages. So there is linguistic diversity here. That's kind of the point. Now, are any of you here from Brooklyn? Anybody from Brooklyn? One person? You're going to feel safe if you go to Agadir. You won't have to worry about eating because they have Brooklyn Burger there. So it's you can. I'm sure your next ticket you're going to head there. I didn't get one, but that's okay. So Berber references. The Berber people. Berber is kind of a term that they don't like to be called. It's not their first choice. They will say they're Berber to us, but they would rather be called Amazigh. That is their name for themselves, Amazigh. And this gets really confusing. Their alphabet is called Tifinagh. Now, this alphabet goes back to the 1st century. They keep pushing it back. When I gave this lecture a couple of years ago, it was 3rd century. Now it's back to the 1st century. They keep finding ruins with Berber alphabetical symbols on them. And so it dates back to the 1st century, but a modern version wasn't developed until the 1960s. So it wasn't used in Morocco or these other countries until recently as an alphabet. So those signs you see now on buildings in Berber or in Tifinagh, it result of Berber being made an official Moroccan language in 2011. So that's pretty recent, part of the constitutional reforms of 2011. All right, so if we look at 1912, why 1912? Because the French came in. They'd been messing around in North Africa. They got into Algeria in 1830. They got into Tunisia in 1881. And they were messing around in Morocco before 1912. But they finally said, well, I think we're just going to boss you guys around now. So they called it a protectorate rather than a colony. And they let the Sultan, those two-syllable words are hard for me. They let the Sultan remain in power all the way through the colonial or protectorate period until 1956, so that it could look like they were just helping these people modernize. But in fact, they called all the shots, and they would say, the Sultan, all right, this is what you got to say now. And of course, he wanted to stay Sultan, so he would do it, and his successors as well. And then once they became independent in 1956, they decided to become known as kings rather than sultans. So you can see that in 1912, Morocco didn't look exactly like it looks today, but pretty similar. The Spaniards had been involved in various parts of this part of Africa before the French, and so they had holdings up north, they had holdings down south, but all of that you see in other than the brown colors, became part of Morocco in 1956. Although, actually, the part up north didn't right away. That took a couple of years before they got control of that. The Spaniards had it, but the Spaniards lost interest, and they got beat in a battle against some of the Berber chiefdoms up north. So there are two places here that are still part of Spain. Those two that I just underlined in red, I'll talk more about them in a second. But when you're in those places, you are in Spain and not Morocco. Kind of curious. So a little bit of this history, repeat a bit. It was a French protectorate for 44 years. Independence, 1956. The folks, remember I introduced this term when we were talking about Corsica and the fact that a number of Corsicans as well as other French moved to these Maghreb countries, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, when France took over and acquired land or acquired businesses and were a fair part of the population, at least 250,000 of them in Morocco when Morocco declared their independence. Most of them left. They weren't necessarily the original migrants. They might be the sons of or daughters of, but they went back to France. Some of them stayed. And so that was a loss of a fair amount of educated people and more advanced farmers. It was a definite loss for the Maghreb countries. The monarchy, as I said, decided to be a king rather than a sultan. It's from the Alawite line, which goes back to the 17th century, which has ruled Morocco since the 17th century, except for interludes like the French Protectorate. And the king today is King Mohammed VI. Now, they made claims on this area called Western Sahara, which had been a Spanish colony. They made claims in 1975. We're going to talk about that in detail in a second. And then these, I already mentioned in 2011, they had these constitutional revisions, which somewhat limited the king's power, but not tremendously. So the Spanish residue, the two places up north, Ceuta and Melilla, these are part of Spain, even though they look like they ought to be part of Morocco, and Morocco certainly thinks they ought to be part of Morocco. Spain claims them, well, no, they're ours. But Spain, of course, when it comes to that little British colony at Gibraltar at the southern end of Spain, the Brits say, no, that belongs to us. And Spain says, well, I think we ought to have it. But then they're not ready to let go of what they have in Morocco. So all curious. Anyway, it's been part of Spanish rule since 1497, and Melilla since 1668, and the Spaniards got it from the Portuguese, who had been there since 1403. These places are important today. They're all fenced in because African immigrants who want to get to Europe, they try and get over the fences and into these places where they get certain rights in terms of possible migration to Europe proper. So it's a real battle to keep immigrants, illegal immigrants, out of these places. Folks cross the Sahara from sub-Saharan Africa and from Morocco itself to try and get into them. So they're important flashpoints. All right, a look at Casablanca. You sail in, there's a port. You can see there are a lot of buildings that could be in any city. It's a big port, biggest port by far in Morocco. The Navy is there. And this is kind of the modern city. I'm sorry, I took this out of a bus window, so in the bottom right, you got a little window flash there. But, you know, that could be in a lot of cities. It doesn't necessarily look that much different than what we might be used to seeing in an American city. Tall buildings, hotels, same chain you'll see in France, Novotel. And then I was in a bus coming back from Rabat, and it was the end of, it was about 5 o'clock on a Friday, and so I just took pictures out the window of people on the street so you could get an idea how people dress. And women, some of them still traditional dress, some of them very modern dress. Kind of like, again, if you looked around in Tunis, much the same thing. Men mostly in Western dress, but not all of them. Some more standing on a street corner there, the same corner into the workday. All right, there are pedestrian streets there, pedestrian malls you could call them. Again, that's familiar to all of us. I took this fairly early in the morning. I don't see a single female in that picture, and that may say something, but women have gained a lot of rights. You heard that, I know, in Tunisia, and they've gained a lot of rights in Morocco. So women, compared to where they were in, say, 2000, have really moved ahead. That's not to say that they have complete equality with men, but they're way ahead of where they were. Now, the Grand Market, it's one of the best markets I've ever been in. There is everything in there, and so if you go on that included tour, you'll see the big mosque, which I'll show you in a second, and the market is almost right next door. And there are other markets as well. There's not just one, but this thing, all of this textile stuff of also. Oh, and by the way, most important thing is that you've got a typewriter there. So yeah, it's don't know what that's about, but one of those curiosities. And then here is, this is just all metalware for sale. Just this one shop, I'm sure there are other shops that had it too, but it just an interesting collection of stuff for people that like to collect unique things. Here's a good place to mosey around. And then olives. I've never seen olives like this, but every kind of olive you can think of, bottled, canned, fresh. They'll let you taste them, and then you can buy them if you want. The guys selling them, some kinds they're kind of interesting looking fellows, like this fellow. But it's olives all over this one section of the market. I wish I liked olives. I'd have been a lot happier there, but that's one of those things. All right, so some of the French residue. In other words, you can see somebody else was there, because if you look back in the buildings in, say, the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s that were built, they clearly were not Islamic or Arabic in character. And the ones I'm putting up here, I didn't question. I'm just using my abilities of observation and thought to be pretty sure that these were built during the French period. I call it French residue. And then post-colonial stuff like this after 1956, more modern buildings, and then really modern ones like you saw in that downtown shot. Also the courthouse, which I have this one I took in 2009. I have one that I took 2 weeks ago, and it looks almost the same. It's a little bit different in the foreground here, but pretty much the same. And a clock tower nearby. And then if you stand in front of the courthouse and look across the street, this is what you see. It's a new event center that's going to open sometime supposedly in the first few months of next year. And then way off to the left there, I'm going to show you this close up. This is, again, just a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to show you a slide from 2009. That was a Catholic cathedral, obviously built during French times, no longer used for that that purpose. It's mostly not used, but used for some cultural events today. And then here is the Hassan II, the previous king, the Hassan II Mosque, supposedly, and I guess it is, because I surely don't know, the largest or tallest mosque in the world. And it is tall. I forget how many feet, but you're not going to jump off it and live. Let's just say it's that high. But I just thought this was a neat shot from the distance. Here it is close up. And again, the included tour, you can take this shot too. That's when I took them. And to get an appreciation of just how tall that thing is, if you look at people on the ground, look at the size of the people, and then it gives you an idea that, holy cow, that's a big thing. And just all the other grounds, I could show you a bunch of slides there, but we don't have time. Here's that Catholic cathedral. So 2009, you could tell in that other shot, it's all been painted nice white now. The crosses were all off it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, gosh, that sure looks like could be a church, especially a Catholic church, since the French were here. And I'm looking at it and kind of walking up toward the door, and this older gentleman comes along, because I was young then. This was 2009. And so I'm walking up, and he says, hey, you want to see inside? I said, yeah. And so I started talking to him. And so here I am, an American in an Islamic country. And I said, well, where are you from? He said, oh, I've been living here a long time, but I'm from Israel. So a Jewish man is taking an American Christian raised, Catholic raised, into a Catholic, ex-Catholic cathedral. It just seemed like a strange moment. Anyway, inside, they had the stained glass windows were still there, but they'd taken out all the statues, all the paintings, all the pews. It was just a shell. The building's still there, and the building has been dressed up, as you saw in that earlier shot. Housing, there are some really nice residential areas, because in a city that big, there are going to be some people that have done very well, and that shows in some of these shots. I could show you again lots of them, because there's a fair size, and there are diplomats and other folks that live in these areas. And then this is perhaps more common. Most people appear to live in apartments or perhaps condos. And as you start to leave the city, it seems like the quality deteriorates. You can see a bit of deterioration here from the previous shot. You go a little further and you've got this, and then you get to the outer limits of the city, and you've got, in Latin America, we would call those squatter settlements, and I'm guessing that's what they are here as well. Really abysmal places to live. There is still a major poverty problem in Morocco. It has come a long way compared to most African countries, but there is still large-scale poverty. And then on the highway between Casablanca and Rabat, they are building these four-story buildings, residential buildings, just for miles along the highway. And so I just took a couple of shots. You can see some still under construction. They just go on and on and on. And if you were living in a squatter settlement and you moved into something like this, that's definitely an improvement. But you can see these are not, clearly not for the moneyed class. And then once you're in Rabat, here's the king's palace. His house looks a little different than the other ones we've seen. And he has major houses in all the large cities. You'll probably see one on your tour as well in Casablanca, because he's got a big one. I think he has 2 residences in Casablanca. And if you close in, major square in front of it for parades, events, etc. And then if you're thinking about, well, I think I'll make a run for the door just to see if I can make it, I would caution against it. You got about 4 or 5 different kinds of military types there. I guess they all have to be represented. So anyway, it's well guarded. And then the Kasbah in Rabat, this is what it looks like. You look at the roof line here. I'm just telling you that for something I'll show you in a second. And that cane sugar guy was right outside, right off this picture. He was right next to the Kasbah, because this is the old fort, right, where the Sultan would live and where other important people and military. It was a fort. Has a very nice landscaped garden inside, and nice digs for the Sultan, but also not so nice for others. I'll show you. This is the wall along the river, and across the river is the other town of Saleh, and the ocean is in the background there. Here is inside. You can see some of the housing there. Just quickly show you that. Then a couple of blocks away is the Medina. And the Medina is where the marketplace is and where most people lived, and all within a wall so that they could not be easily attacked, hopefully. And inside, narrow streets. Again, if you went to the Medina in Tunis, nothing too much different here. And some really nice houses inside it, including this one, which was 2 stories, and one that a lot of people would be happy to be living in. And then here's the modern. And look at the roof line there. I remember the Kasbah. I showed you the roof line there. Well, here you can see kind of a copycat thing. Here's the modern part of Rabat. And then here is the really modern part of Rabat. Can anybody guess what that is? Library. No. Thank you for guessing, though. You get some credit for that. Anybody else? Museum? No. Synagogue, auditorium. It's the train station. Huh? There's a pretty good train network in Morocco, and this is the king's town, so he wants the train depot to look proper, so that's what it is. All right, now we're going to talk about, and hopefully I'm doing okay in time. I'm going to have to rush a bit. So what you see in yellow here, that is Spanish Sahara. And so Morocco becomes independent in 1956. Spain has been messing with Spanish Sahara for a long time. Remember that 1975 is when Francisco Franco died, the fascist dictator of Spain, from 1939 to 1975. So whether it was a weak moment or whatever, Spain said, we're getting out. And part of it was that the local population, which was, I'll show you numbers in a second, not a lot of folks, and scattered around. We're mostly talking about tribal Arabs or Berbers scattered out in the desert, because this is all Sahara Desert. And so the King of Morocco saw an opening. Why? Why would he want all this? 3rd richest phosphate deposits in the world. A lot of money to be made from that. One of the best fishing grounds in the world. And then some other resources such as iron ore, thoughts that there may be petroleum offshore, and so he moved for it. And here's just another shot. There is really only one city which has blossomed under the presence of Morocco, Laayoune, and you'll see it spelled different ways on different maps, but it's the only real city there. The rest of them are oases kinds of places, or where the mines are, some mine kinds of settlements. But other than that, it's very sparsely populated. So the people there called Sahrawis, and at the time that the Spanish were going to leave, they'd just taken a census, less than 75,000 people in that huge area, okay? I talked about Lubbock, Texas in a previous talk. This is a third the size of Lubbock, Texas, that whole area. In 1991, there were almost 200,000. How did it grow that fast? Were those people really spending a lot of time, you know, making babies? No. Well, maybe they were, but not that many. And today, over 500,000. That's tremendous population growth in a relatively short span. How does that happen? In 1973, in order to move for independence from Spain, these folks formed the Polisario Front, 1973, and they declared an independent country, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, in 1975. And Morocco says, oh no, we want that. And so they went to war. So we had a war between the Polisario Front and Morocco for 16 years. If you remember the newspapers, you were reading newspapers in the 1980s, you surely read about this, because I can remember reading about it. And so what Morocco did to establish a presence there, the king said, all right, hey, any of you guys want to go there? We're going to help you get there. They had 350,000 people march to the Spanish Sahara. It's an unbelievable kind of thing. I've never heard of anything like that. Again, in a country like Morocco, 1975, it wasn't as advanced as it is today in terms of wealth and measures of wealth and so on. Here is an image I found on the internet, and that's the ocean in the background at the top of the slide. And what a train of people. Just an amazing kind of thing. And so you may say, well, how do they go about making a claim like this? Well, you saw this map, I believe, in Knut Nessie's lecture on the Maghreb. And if you look at Marrakesh, there in the middle, Marrakesh was the capital of this empire at that time. And you can see arrows going out from Marrakesh in every direction. They controlled half of the Iberian Peninsula, and they controlled all of what today is Morocco and Spanish Sahara. And so the king says, hey, you know, that belonged to us before. We have a right to it. There are other cultures that have done that as well that I don't need to get into talking about. And so this Green March, and I already told you what they're after there. The Polisario Front, they were at war for 16 years. What happens is that most of the Sahrawis ended up, there was peace in 1991. There hasn't been real war since then. But they all ended up because the Moroccans forced them out of the territories that they had been in, most of them, not quite all of them. And they ended up 5 refugee camps. So there's still something like 140,000 Sahrawis living in Algeria in these refugee camps in a place called Tindouf, which I'll show you on a map here in a second. So who all was involved in this? Well, Morocco, obviously, the Sahrawis and the Polisario Front. Algeria was supporting and Algeria and Morocco, you should know, have not always gotten along real well since they both became independent. They were the main supporter of Polisario. Russia was as well, or the Soviet Union, I should say. Mauritania, another neighbor, made a claim, but then they backed off in 1979. And Muammar Gaddafi also supported Polisario, but none of that was enough to counter Morocco's efforts. So what they did to keep the Sahrawis at bay was to build a wall called the Berm. From 1981 to 87, it took them a while because it's over 1,000 miles long and it extends on into Morocco itself. Built of what? Sand, rock, earth, just natural materials out in the desert, 3 meters high. For those of you weak on metrics, that's roughly 10 feet. Trenches along each side, barbed wire, manned guard posts every 5 kilometers, every 3 miles, electronic detection and profusion of landmines. So they meant business in building that. And in the blue line here, if you can follow that, and if you follow it, it goes on up into Morocco. There's Morocco in the blue line. So it went into Morocco. And then the refugees, that's Tindouf in that extreme western part of Algeria. And that's where, as I said, maybe 140,000 of them are still stuck there. And here's the line in red. If you follow that red line, this is a CIA map. And here is a photo I took off the net of the berm. And that's the Saharan desert. And there's a guard post in the middle of it. And I'm thinking, wow, how would you like to be on duty in the Moroccan army? Well, Ali, you're going to be out there for 3 years, so, you know, there are a few lizards around, and we'll send a horse out every once in a while. You could go for a little ride. But it just has to be horrible duty, right? And so the UN got involved in this. They said, well, we got to find some resolution here. So they got peace in 1991, and their idea was, let the people there vote. Do they want to be part of this Arab Republic, or do they want to be part of Morocco? And so both sides agreed to that, but Morocco forever put off having the actual vote take place. And they would say, well, who gets to vote here? And of course, they kept sending people in. They kept giving economic benefits to people. And so they were dominating by far in terms of numbers. But the Arabs, the folks that were part of the Polisario Front said, you know, it's the people that were here when you invaded us, they're the ones that ought to be voting. So they could never agree. And so MINURSO, and as a matter of fact, when I gave this talk 2 weeks ago afterwards, a gentleman came up and said, I was on the MINURSO team there. And so he had been there. He said it's exactly what it was like. And he said, you know, the wind blows out there all the time. The sand blows around. Those mines get blown. And one of our workers stepped on one of those mines and killed him. I mean, landmines got to be one of the worst things that anybody ever invented. But MINURSO was there to prepare for an election that has never happened and never will happen, I'm quite sure. They even hired James Baker, who you may remember as Secretary of State under George Bush Sr., a well-respected diplomat by both Republicans and Democrats, probably the best that they could get, and he couldn't get a resolution. Here's an example of the mission at work. If you look on the side of that truck, it says UN, so they're out there visiting the camels and some of the Berbers and making sure everything's okay. So 91, no resolution, no agreement on who's going to vote. Morocco just stalled forever, and they kept encouraging immigration to the area. And so I'm going to show you the main city of Laayoune in a second. But not the UN, not the AU, which is the African Union, or the EU, the European Union, agreed to recognize Morocco's rights here as of early 2020. There are only 4 countries in the world that recognized their right. So Morocco wasn't doing well in the international arena. But in 2020, Trump said, listen to the king, if you will recognize Israel, we will recognize your right to Western Sahara. And the king says, okay. So he recognized Israel. We recognized Western Sahara as part of Morocco. In July of this year, President Macron of France also recognized their right, and so it's pretty much over with. There are over 40 countries now that recognize Morocco's claim to Western Sahara. Major countries such as Russia, China, Italy do not. Many others, most countries obviously still don't, but I don't see any way out of this for the Sahrawis. And in terms of of what the country is like. Well, look at the road network in Morocco, and there is the border. South of that line is the Western Sahara, and you can see it is not dense with roads, folks. So the Moroccanization, here is the coastline, and there is quite a fishing operation out there, a lot of fishing boats, and a small town for those folks to have residents and suppliers and buyers and other folks. This is, got off the boat. I was out with the American Geographical Society, and we got off the boat, and the king was there to say hello with his picture. And then there were more big teapots than I've ever seen in one place. For 60 people. We could have each had a gallon and a half of tea had we wanted. And here are the fishing boats coming in, and they're, you know, these are not huge factory boats, but they're sizable fishing boats. These aren't the small little things you saw in Malta, if you happen to see the fishing boats in Malta. Here I took a shot. There are several tiers like this beyond your view, because they're not that high, but they're just a real density of fishing boats going on. And then once you head to Laayoune, the main city, it's just all desert. And these are what geomorphologists call Barcan dunes, and these are crescent-shaped dunes. If you look at all those in the middle and on the right-hand side, you can see the crescent shape. It's all a result of wind direction building those dunes. And as I was walking around out there, I saw what I don't know what its real name is, but I called it an ostrich beetle because it just stuck his head in the sand, and he said, "Well, that's it. I'm done." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, yeah, okay, if that's how you want to go." But I didn't do anything. I didn't stage this. Honest to God, this is just what this fellow was doing, and we each do it our own way. So here is Laayoune. That's the street pattern. And then what you see is there are seasonal streams in the Sahara, and this is one of them. And where you see that greenish area, they have built a dam so that there's still some water there, but the rest of it's all dry, and it's dry most of the time. These are called wadis. Now that's a word to remember because it means basically stream or stream bed. Remember, the Arabs are and the Moors are in Spain, and so that word worked its way into the names of rivers in Spain, only it's spelled, instead of W-A-D-I, G-U-A-D, Wad, Guadalajara in Mexico, and the river that Sevilla sits on, which we will be near, is called the Guadalquivir. So that's what, and all kinds of rivers in southern Spain begin with G-U-A-D, particularly out near Sevilla. That word made it into Spanish, as did a lot of Arabic words. Here's a close-up of the street plan. These are all shots I took in 2009. It's grown a lot since then. Now 220,000 people. So it is a sizable place, about the same population as Lubbock, if I recall correctly, but it looks different. Moroccan flags, a lot of pinkish or salmon-colored buildings. They've planted palm trees all along there, which today I'm sure are much taller and more attractive. Public areas, schools. You see the kids playing soccer. And Morocco, by the way, is an African soccer power. If you are a soccer fan or football fan, as they call it in Europe and elsewhere, you know that Morocco is, they're football fanatics. Most people apparently living in apartments, from whatever I could see, or perhaps condos, and beautiful new mosque, and folks in Arabic dress. You can see ladies in both cases. These could be Sahrawis. I don't know. Government buildings. And then you wonder, of course, can I get pizza there? Because that's always everybody's question. And the answer is yes, you can. And here is evidence of it. And I love the little guy there in Western dress and his mom in very traditional dress. Really a contrast. And here's a guy welcoming you into the restaurant. And my favorite part of this, they have the best maitre d' I have seen in Western Sahara. Just a really friendly guy, welcoming everybody in, no question about it. You could eat there. And then the strangest thing, while we're there, there's a Catholic church. Now, this is a new place, so this isn't residue like that cathedral in Casablanca. right? Which was not used as a religious facility anymore. You notice that there is a gate and a fence around it, so I'm not sure how much this gets used, but the fact that it's there is kind of amazing. And I should say that there was a huge Jewish community in Morocco, 250,000 Jews, well respected, well integrated in a way into the country, not huge discrimination. And now, unfortunately, because of World War II and other things after that, there are only about 2,500 left. But in a lot of the Arabic countries, there were large Jewish communities that had rights and were not plagued upon, I guess I could say. Inside, very simple. Only one statue I could see way over here on the right. The rest of them are all paintings. Those would be statues in a regular Catholic church. And just a very simple arrangement. So how much it gets used, I have no idea. But just something that you wouldn't expect to find in that sort of thing. So that's my look at Morocco and Western Sahara. Thank you all for coming. And I hope to see you next time. I'll be talking about Cadiz and Sevilla in a couple of days. So have a good dinner.